Becky Duff here. Welcome back to my channel. This is my January wrap-up. So I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I don't normally do wrap-ups. I wanted to do a little bit of a wrap-up that instead of just sitting down at the end of the month and telling you about all the books I've read, I want to do it after I've read a book or two or whatever when I have the time to do it. Just so it's like fresh in my memory to do a short review. I wanted to start the reread of the Outlander series, which is currently 9 books, and the 9th book just came out this past November. I wanted to start January 1st, start reading Outlander, and work my way through and hopefully get to the 9th book by the end of this year. I am not very far along yet. I read it on my Kobo as an ebook from my library, so I read the whole 8 books for free, and now I've been buying them like used copies, like this one was $6, and I only have the first 5 books, including the one in my hand. But anyways, I'm not very far into this just yet. So I won't be doing like full on like reviews or anything of these, but just like updates every once in a while. I am on page 136 out of 850 pages for the first book. And then the buzzword-a-thon. The word for January was the 5 W's, like who, what, where, when, why. So I read The Nowhere Girls by Amy Reed. I heard about this book through the Redheaded Reader, and she talked about, like, I think she really liked this book, but just the way she talked about it made me want to pick it up. And I picked it up last year and finally had an excuse to read it. This book is a YA. This high school girl, she is raped. The school and everyone just kind of like doesn't really believe it, that it happened. They don't really believe what she said or that those boys would do that. Her and her family end up leaving town, and this new girl moves in. So it starts with this new girl moving in and happens to be living in that house. And then it's told from a few different perspectives. There's like Us, where you hear about like all the different girls and what they're doing together. Then it will come to like a name. Grace is the girl who just moved in. And Rosina is a girl, she's like riding her bike and meets Grace and is like, oh, that other girl used to live there and this bad thing happened to her, and then she had a meltdown and they had to leave. And she's like, what happened and stuff? So this is like a year after this incident has happened. Grace learns about it and she's like, we need to do something about this. We need to fight back. We can't allow the boys to get away with this stuff. And at first the other girls are kind of like, well, it's already happened. No one believed her when she said it. Grace is very much like, no, we need to do something. So they start this group called the Nowhere Girls because they don't want anyone to know like who's starting it, who's making these accusations, anything like that. They get access to like the school email addresses, and every student has an email address associated with the school. And so they send out this school-wide email to all the girls, and they start this club, and they're like, we're not gonna have sex with any of the boys, and we're gonna like shut them out and stuff like that. And there's some really good conversations in this that I really liked, and they're trying to get revenge on the boys that they believe committed the rape, because it was like multiple guys, but also like standing up for themselves against all the guys in the school. And it doesn't paint all the guys as like, you're a man, you have a penis, you're bad. It doesn't paint them like that. There are a few guys that are like on the women's side, because they talk about ending the rape culture and just having equality. It includes guys speaking up for the women and calling it out. Like if a guy's saying something that's sexist and you don't agree with it, call it out and be like, that's not cool. Let's not talk about women like that and stuff. And just like walking away from a conversation or being like, I don't want to be your friend because this is how you treat women and I don't want to be associated with you. So I like that Amy Reed doesn't paint all the men as like bad, evil guys, that there are some good guys out there. There's some really interesting conversations as an adult with kids, hearing these girls that are like 16, 17, 18 being like, one of them is like, I enjoy sex and I see no shame in having sex and I don't want to go on this sex fast. And I'm like, you're too young. Because like my daughter's already 10 and I'm like, I don't want her, like this book made me be like, I don't want you to go to high school and have to face all of this horrible, horrible stuff. It's out there, but I just want to keep you in a tiny little bubble and not have you exposed to all the junk that goes on in like middle school and high school. As a 34-year-old woman reading this, I'm like, you're 16, just worry about school. Don't worry about if you enjoy sex or not. You're too young. Stop it. There was a lot of good conversations, and I would be interested in having like my daughters read this when they are the appropriate age and having those discussions with them. Because there is talk about, is sex good or bad? And Grace's family is religious, but her mom got kicked out of their church because she's a little bit too liberal. She's kind of like a pastor, speaker person. I think in the denomination they're in, she couldn't be like a technical pastor because she's a woman, but she's speaking in like the new church. And so there is a little bit of religious talk in it. I didn't find it was like heavy handed, and it wasn't like you have to wait until you're married to have sex, blah, blah, blah. But that is one path people choose. And I think that's an important topic to say, like, if you don't want to have sex, that's okay. Don't feel pressure thinking that everyone in your school is having sex, because they're not. And they actually have that talk in here. And there's like 50 of these teenage girls sitting around the room, and they're like, who here hasn't had sex? And like about half or more put up their hands saying like, I'm not having sex, and have never had it. And so I think it's important to add, like, to validate the fact that, like, whether you're waiting for marriage or not, if you're not having sex during high school, that's okay. Like, don't feel like you're missing out on something because everyone is doing it, because they're not, I promise you. And if you want to wait until you're married, that's great. And no one should pressure you otherwise, or be like, you need to test drive your future spouse because you need to know if they're good in bed or not. Trust me, no one is good in bed when they're starting out. Some of the girls are slut-shamed and stuff, but they talk about, like, why is it okay for the guys to sleep with whoever they want and they're heroes, but then the girls do it and they're whores and sluts and stuff like that. So that conversation is had too. I think this book definitely opened up quite a lot of conversations that way, and there's one character in here who has Asperger's. I have no experience with Asperger's or like with my own kids or anybody in my family or anything like that, so I don't know how the representation is in this book, but I thought it was handled well. I liked that there was different representation and stuff in here as well. I enjoyed this book, and I would recommend it, and I would even recommend it for, like, if my daughter was, like, 14, 15, like, you kind of want to get them to read it a little bit before they get into this age group so that you can discuss things beforehand. But even if you're, like, a mom and you have a daughter or a son and you want to, like, read this book and have these discussions together, I think that'd be really good as well. So I enjoyed this for the buzzword with the word where in the title. And then this month you might be seeing a little bit of a theme beyond that, and Outlander, what I'm reading. I decided to pick up Future Home of the Living God by Louise Erdrich. And this is like a futuristic dystopian novel. Evolution stops as mysteriously as it began. You're not sure why. You're like, what's going on? There's a few things that are like popping up. The main character in this is, her name is Cedar, and she's writing, this whole book is just a letter to her unborn child. So you're just kind of like, why has evolution stopped? And it says it stops mysteriously. You're not really sure exactly, like, how long has this been going on, and why are pregnant people so valuable? Pregnancy and childbearing quickly become issues of state security. 26-year-old Cedar, the adopted daughter of idealistic Minneapolis liberals, is as disturbed and uncertain as the rest of America. But for Cedar, this change is profound and deeply personal. She is 4 months pregnant. An unexpected dystopian thriller from a writer of startling originality, Future Home of the Living God is also a moving meditation on female agency, love, self-determination, biology, and natural rights. So this book was really interesting because, like I said, this whole book is written from the point of view of Cedar writing to her future child, and not even knowing if she can keep this child. She is in hiding because they are taking pregnant women and putting them, like, in a hospital and taking good care of them and making sure they get everything they need and they're getting their right food and stuff like that, and having, like, a bunch of blood work and ultrasounds and all this stuff. And it seems like, okay, they're really taking good care of us, but most of the women and the children don't survive. So she's terrified. She's like, somebody could call her in and she'll be picked up by these people and put into this hospital, prison type thing, and have her baby taken from her. So she's like running through the whole book trying to protect herself and her unborn child. You're never really told, like, why they're capturing pregnant women and why they're not coming out. If they are captured, why the babies aren't surviving and why the women aren't surviving either. Tomorrow I'll be 39 weeks pregnant on January 17th. It's interesting to read as a pregnant woman and thinking, like, I've been in so much pain and it's been hard for me just to, like, walk, let alone running for my life and trying to protect myself and my baby. Like, this is her first pregnancy and she's a little bit younger, so she probably has a head start than I would, but it's just interesting reading it as a pregnant person, and that is why I wanted to read it, because that's my theme this month, is reading all my books about pregnancy. I would not say this book has, not that it is an unsatisfying ending, but it's not neatly like wrapped up in a tiny little bow and everything's happy and you just go on and you're like, oh good, it worked out for them. It doesn't quite wrap up like that. She is due to have this baby December 25th on Christmas, and she's writing, and again it's like a letter / journal to her baby. So December 24th or December 14th. I am alone with the truth of my body. You are in it and I have to get you out. Baby, I love you, but you are huge. Your exit is supposed to stretch, but 10 centimeters isn't that much wider than the mouth of a water glass. How stretchy am I? Not that stretchy. I'm rigid. I've always been a rigid thinker and I'm lousy at yoga. You should stop growing right now. You are already too big, but you don't care. You continue to grow and grow. And I was like, that one hit. It was January 11th, 2022, 38 weeks, 1 day pregnant with baby number 4. I wrote that, like, I underlined and was like, that's where I'm at in my life right now, reading this, and I am feeling that. And even yesterday, the baby was, like, rolling around so much, and every time it moved, it was, like, hurting my back, and I'm like, this is just a backache, like a period PMS backache, and I still gotta go through contractions and get this baby out, even though it's baby number 4. I'm like, I kind of have an idea of what to expect, but at the same time, every pregnancy and labor and delivery is different, but I'm not going in completely blind, but I'm just like, I don't want to go through the pain of labor. That resonated with me. This was a good book. I enjoyed it. I would recommend it. There is a loss of a baby that she experiences. Not the main character who's writing the book. Somebody else she knows loses a baby. And it's on page and it happens like right there. That's all I can really think about, but definitely look up trigger warnings if pregnancy stuff triggers you. And then today I finished Sheila Heti's Motherhood in the bath. And this one was an interesting one. I had to keep looking, like, is this Sheila Heti's story? Or is this like an autobiography kind of thing? Or is it somebody else? Is this fiction? Like, what is this? It says Heti's narrator considers with the same urgency whether she will do so at all. So, like, whether she'll have a baby or not. So it says, like, a narrator. So it's fiction. It was very much like what I think of as, like, stream of consciousness writing. And it wasn't bad. It had really short, like, parts to it. You read, like, this paragraph and then there's a break and it's, like, a different thought and different thoughts. And then there's kind of, like, different parts and stuff like that. But, you know, like, the writing was really easy to get through and pretty short and stuff like that. Pretty simple. It wasn't just like this stream of consciousness that went on for like pages and pages and pages and pages and you're like, okay, I'm done. It's like one long run-on sentence. It wasn't like that, thankfully. In the beginning, before you start reading the book, it talks about flipping 3 coins is a technique used by people who consult the I Ching, a division system that originated in China over 3,000 years ago. By flipping 3 coins 6 times, one of 64 states is revealed and a text elaborates their meaning. In the pages that follow, 3 coins are used, a technique inspired by the I Ching, but not the actual I Ching, which is something different. And then a further note, in this book, all results from the flipping of coins result from the flipping of actual coins. So that was kind of cool, and there's like sections in here where the narrator is talking. Oh, here you go. Flipping 3 coins on a desk. 2 or 3 heads, yes. 2 or 3 tails, no. And then she's like, is this book a good idea? Is the time to start it now? Here in Toronto, so this is a Canadian read as well, which was cool. And Sheila Heti is Canadian and lives in Toronto. So then there's nothing to be worried about. Should I be worried? What should I be worried about? Will reading help my soul? Will being quiet help my soul? Will this book help my soul? So she's asking these questions and then you're getting the coin flip answers. So it was kind of cool and an interesting thing to add to the book as well. The narrator starts her story. She's 37 years old, I believe, so she's coming to the end of being able to physically have children, and she has no children. And she's with this long-term partner, Miles, and he had a child when he was younger, but he's like, I don't want more children. It wasn't planned to have a child. It just happened, and I think she's like an older, like 18 or something now, but she doesn't play like a huge part in the story. But anyways, Miles was like, I don't want kids. I'm a lawyer. I'm doing well for myself, blah, blah, blah. And our main character is trying to think, like, do I want kids? And she's going through all this and talking to, like, her friends who have kids and seeing people who don't have kids and all the stuff that goes on with, do I want to become a mother? And I only have a very short amount of time. And she even goes to see, like, are her eggs viable? Could I freeze my eggs? Stuff like that. Just that struggle of being a woman in your late 30s and not having had children yet, and the time to biologically safely be able to do it running out. Does she decide to have kids or not? So you got to read the book to find that out, because I'm not going to spoil that for you. It was interesting, and I'll insert a clip here. I read 2 passages from it that I thought were really good. Why do I think it could matter to Nicola if I don't have kids? Living one way is not a criticism of every other way of living. Is that the threat of the woman without kids? Yet the woman without kids is not saying that no woman should have kids, or that you, woman with a stroller, have made the wrong choice. Her decision about her life is no statement about yours. One person's life is not a political or general statement about how all lives should be. Other lives should be able to exist alongside our own without any threat of judgment at all. The world isn't a binary for me as it was before, with parents on one side and non-parents on the other. Seeing someone with a child tells me nothing about the life that was in their head or is currently in their head, just as seeing someone without a child tells me nothing about the life that was in their head. Life occurs to each of us equally, with all its forces of randomness and care, and whatever forces act on a human life, which we can only guess at but still don't know. As a 34-year-old woman about to give birth to my 4th baby at any moment, I felt like Sheila Heti did a really good job of not condemning people's choices, whether they choose to have kids or not have kids. I didn't feel like I was throwing my life away because I've chosen to have 4 children. Like, I made the wrong choice or whatever, and I feel like those who choose not to have kids, it wasn't like, oh, well, you're wasting your life by not having children. And she goes through those arguments and stuff, like, in her own mind and talking to her friends and all this stuff. Like, she wrestles through all of that, but I didn't feel, like, condemned. And as I'm not a woman who chose not to have kids, it didn't feel like it was condemning on that side either. So I thought that was really good, and she balanced it really well. I totally understand, like, that flip-flopping, do I want kids, do I not want kids, because when I was, like, younger, I just assumed I would have children, but then I got to a point as a late teen, 17, 18, 19, 20, I was like, I don't know if I want kids, maybe I'll never have kids. And then I got married at 22, and me and my husband talked about, like, yeah, we want to have kids someday. But I never had, like, thoughts of actually planning on trying to get pregnant. I just got pregnant. It just happened. I think, like, God knew if I didn't just get pregnant, I would have just never done it. I would have been too scared to, like, go for it and make that final decision. Just like people ask me, like, are you done having kids? And I'm like, I'm not at a place where I feel like I can definitively say yes or no. I don't like making those big life decisions because it's such a big life decision. It's not like buying a house or something, which is financially a huge thing and it's a big deal, but, like, if it doesn't work out, you're like, well, whatever, we'll move or downsize. But having, like, a baby, a human life, like, that's, like, the biggest decision you can make. So God was like, no, you are meant to have kids, and now is the timing. So my 1st and my 4th were surprise babies, and I planned my 2nd and 3rd. Sheila Heti's character in Motherhood, I don't have to make those wrestling decisions. I'm at a point now where I would have to wrestle with, do we want more kids? But I'm not wrestling with the existential crisis of, do I have kids at all? I enjoyed it, and I'm going to pick up another book. I have 2 more pregnancy books. I don't think I'll get to both of them before baby is born, but probably still read them in the next couple weeks. So that is my not so short wrap up on, like, the 3 and 8th books I've read in January so far, but hopefully I can edit this down a bit, and yeah, I'll see you when I've read another book. So I have 2 other books to talk about with my January wrap up. I did start a couple of other books and I'm still reading the first Outlander, but I will talk about any books that I haven't completed in January after I've completed them. I paused the one book I was reading to read Where They Found Her for part of Gabby's book troop book club, and the live show was January 26th, so I was like, I'm having a baby the 24th, or well, I'm due the 24th, so who knows when I'll have the baby, but hopefully I can make it to the live show, and I wanted to read the book in time for the live show, and I had a baby at 4:40 in the morning, January 26th, so I missed the live show, but I did catch it later on. I watched it. Where They Found Her, there's a few different perspectives, but, like, one of the main ones is this woman who is a reporter. She lost a child in the womb quite late in the pregnancy, almost full term. In the pregnancy, the baby just died for no medical reason that they could find. Her husband got offered a job at a university in like another town, and so she decided to take that. They already had a daughter, and this would have been their second child. And she left her job as a lawyer and became a reporter in this new town. She gets a phone call one morning saying that a body has been found down by this river, and this guy, he's like the head of this newspaper, he's like the editor guy, he's running out of town for something, and the other reporter is having like gallbladder surgery or something like that. And then she's like, normally she just covers like the arts department or something, and anyways, for whatever reason, she's the only reporter who can cover it. So he's like, can you go down there and do this reporting of this body? And they don't know like whose body it is or anything like that at this point. So anyway, she goes down there. It turns out that it's been an infant that has been found. So there's lots of mystery there, but they won't tell her like how old the infant is or anything like that. None of that's a spoiler. That's like right at the very beginning of the book. She's struggling, and her husband is kind of struggling with her doing the story as well, because the loss of their pregnancy had been 2 or 3 years before that, and the husband is strongly like, you shouldn't do this. She went into like a major depressive spiral after the loss of the pregnancy. Had a really, really, really hard time with it, understandably so. But the husband is like, you're finally getting back on your feet. You're finally starting to be like a little bit more of your old self. And he's afraid that reporting on this case is just going to be too hard for her. And at first she kind of thinks the same thing, but then she's like, no, I need to do this. I want to do this. This is going to help me. And she decides to pursue the story. Anyways, there's a few other mysteries going on and a few other characters, and as I was listening to the live show with Gabby, they were talking about like how forgettable the book was, and then they kept mentioning things, and I was like, oh yeah, because like they took note because it's Gabby's book club, and because like if I was co-hosting or hosting a book club, I'd take notes too, right? So they were like mentioning all the stuff, and I was like, oh yeah, I totally forgot about that stuff. I have a hard time remembering details in books sometimes, and just with everything going on, being like super pregnant and reading like other books and stuff. The one thing about the books I was reading in January is that they were all, I decided to focus on like pregnancy, mother kind of books, right? And one of the sad things is that all the main mothers in these books had like a bad relationship. Not in every single one, but one of the themes was like they had a bad relationship with their mother, and it made them question whether they wanted to be a mother themselves, like in Motherhood, or it made them question their mothering techniques. Like I was reading The Push, and then I put that kind of on pause and read Where They Found Her, and just before that I'd read like Motherhood. So some of it, like the bad mother-daughter relationships, kind of got muddled in my mind. Anyways, there's other characters that you're following and some of their stories and their struggles and stuff, which didn't really play a huge part into the rest of the book. Some of it did, some of it didn't. Gabby and her co-host were talking about some of the side stories were just kind of unnecessary. I would agree with that, but I enjoyed it like as I was reading it. And then you're also getting the main character, Molly. She's writing like updates and articles and stuff, right, as the reporter. So you'll see like what she wrote online and then people's comments underneath of it. And like they were saying in the live show, like it was kind of pointless and dumb, but I thought like the comments, some of them were very like derogatory and negative and bad, and they're just like, oh, what kind of mother could kill her child, because they're just assuming it was probably a teenage pregnancy and they just left the baby out there because they didn't know what to do. And they're like, what kind of mother could do that? And where are the parents to the one who had this baby? And how could they ignore this? And blah, 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 like all this stuff, and just writing on it. And then other people are like, we need to find who's out there, because they don't know who the mom is. So they're like, maybe the mom's dead too. Maybe she was murdered. Who knows, right? And so some people are like, we need to find whoever did this. And other people are like, can't we just have a little compassion and stuff? Yeah, it wasn't needed. It was kind of an interesting point on the comment sections of these articles and stuff like that, because it's such a gong show when you go into the comment sections. There was a couple twists at the end, like who the mother was of the baby and who the father was. I don't know, it was okay. It was interesting. Like I said, I found it entertaining as I was reading it, but then I didn't remember a lot of it after I read it. But I was also still really into The Push, because I was kind of like halfway through when I read this, by Ashley Audrain. This was also picked because of Gabby from Gabby Reads, who this was like one of her favorite books last year, and she keeps like gushing about it. So I was like, okay, I have to read this. So I managed to finish this before my baby was born. And I love this cover and like the colors and stuff like that. This book, I'm so terrible at giving like a synopsis. Blythe Connor is determined to be the warm, comforting mother to her new baby Violet that she never had. But in the thick of motherhood's exhausting early days, Blythe doesn't find the connection with her daughter she expected. She's convinced something is wrong with Violet. She is distant, rejects affection, and becomes increasingly disruptive at play school. Or is it all in Blythe's head? Her husband, Fox, says she's imagining things. Fox doesn't see what she sees. He sees a wife who is struggling to cope with the day-to-day challenges of being a mother. The more Fox dismisses her fears, the more Blythe begins to question her own sanity, and the more we begin to question what Blythe is telling us about her life as well. Definitely look up trigger warnings for this, because there is also another infant death in this. I would say like postpartum depression and just struggles with motherhood in general. I would definitely look up trigger warnings for this one. It could be a very, very triggering book. And I thought it was really interesting because Blythe does come across as an unreliable narrator, and she comes across as a little bit paranoid, but the whole time I was thinking like, why does no one believe her? Even if it is all just in her head, no one is like taking her seriously. They're just like, it's fine, it's fine. You're just tired. Oh, there's nothing wrong with Violet. It's fine, it's fine. I feel like we need to take better care of mothers, especially so recent after delivering a baby. If you just had a baby, chances are you're going to have some emotional ups and downs in the first couple of weeks, and you might be a little bit more emotional, crying a little bit more often, or whatever, you're just feeling down because your hormones are all over the place. There's such a huge hormonal shift after you have a baby, and that's normal. But if it goes on for more than 2 weeks, if you're having like really dark thoughts and you're just feeling like really, really depressed, really, really low, and again, it goes for more than 2 weeks, you need to seek out help. If you don't have kids yourself, but your friend has a kid, or your sister, or just somebody in your life has a kid, and you notice that they're not seeming to like bounce back kind of thing, like talk to them and say like, you can talk to me, I'm here to help you. There's nothing wrong if you need to go to a doctor. It's chemicals in your brain. You're having a chemical reaction in your body and in your brain. So if you're not doing well, get help. Seek help, seriously. And don't just like brush it off as you're crazy. Like the husband in this is kind of just like, you're fine, and no one is like really seeing what's happening, except for her mother-in-law at one point does notice. She witnesses an episode between Blythe and her daughter Violet, and the mother-in-law is like, that's intense, and Blythe just kind of like brushes it off, but the mother-in-law is like, no, that's really bad, and kind of tries to talk to her son, but the son again just like is like, no, whatever, it's fine. I think this brings up a lot of really good conversations. It also brings up a lot of like what we don't talk about as new moms. We just talk about like how amazing things are, right? And she says like, I'd been warned about those hard early days. I'd done the research. Nobody talked about the feeling of being woken up after 40 minutes of sleep on blood-stained sheets with the dread of knowing what had to happen next. I felt like the only mother in the world who wouldn't survive it. The only mother who couldn't recover from having her perineum stitched from her butt to her vagina. The only mother who couldn't fight through the pain of newborn gums cutting like razor blades on her nipples. The only mother who couldn't pretend to function with her brain in the vice of sleeplessness. The only mother who looked down at her daughter and thought, please go away. Violet cried only when she was with me. It felt like a betrayal. We were supposed to want each other. Here she's saying like, I'm the only mother who couldn't do this, who feels like this. I'm the only one. And that's a lie. That's a lie. You're not the only one. And that's the problem with us not talking about it and glossing over it and thinking to ourselves, well, I'm the only one, so I'm not going to bring it up because everyone else is just so in love with their newborn baby that they're going to think like I'm a horrible mother. And that's not true. You're not a horrible mother because you're having a hard time, because you're tired, and sometimes you think like, please go away. That doesn't mean you don't love your child. So please keep that in mind. That does not mean you don't love your child. It means you're exhausted. And your baby's exhausted. And especially if it's your first, you're both new at this. They're new at life. You're new at being a parent. And it's exhausting. And when you're tired, you think horrible things. And you think things that aren't necessarily true. Like I put, the emotional roller coaster of motherhood is filled with so many ups and downs and loops. It's amazing how much you can love your child while simultaneously wanting to be away from them. Motherhood is beautiful and rewarding, but it's also emotionally, mentally, and physically taxing. It's exhausting being a mother. And we need to talk and share with others and let people know, like, it's okay if you're feeling this way. The highlight I put here, these are thoughts I never let leave my lips. These are thoughts most mothers don't have. Thinking about, like, getting away, like just putting the baby in the crib and walking away and never coming back. And I think the truth is a lot of mothers have these thoughts, but we are too ashamed of them, so we do not share our struggles with others, and more of us are left off feeling alone and ashamed in our motherhood struggles. Even if you're thinking, like, I just want to leave and escape and not be with my child anymore, I would say that's a normal thought. But if it goes like darker to like wanting to hurt your child or anything like that, get help. And even talk to a friend about those thoughts of like, sometimes I just want to escape, sometimes I just want to run away. I fantasize about living on a beach by myself, or like spending 3 weeks at a spa vacation, or whatever your little like daydream fantasies are about leaving and getting away from your life. Talk to somebody about that stuff and just share and know that you're not alone in that. You're not alone. You're not alone. Trust me. So I'm running out of space. I have like 6 minutes left to talk. It'd be interesting to do a more in-depth video of this book, I think. Bookmark. Always leaving my bookmarks in books. As like a thriller. I don't know what this is considered like thriller-wise. It just says fiction. But as a, like, it's a good story, but there is a lot of triggering stuff in it, so keep that in mind when you go into this book. The ending was good. It was really good. I like how it ended. At the same time, I was like, no one's listening to Blythe. Nobody's listening to her. This is why it ended the way it ended. This is why she struggled so bad. This is why, like, she never got any help that she needed because no one believed her. So if there's a new mom in your life, or even a new dad, and they are just telling you all their struggles and their thoughts, and they seem like crazy and like that can't possibly be true, just listen to them and tell them, like, I believe you. Even if you're just believing that they believe that this thing is true, that's okay. Just let them know that they are not alone, and if they need help, to point them in the direction of help. I would definitely recommend this book if you think you can handle the really tough subject matter in it. So that was my January reading. It was really good. I enjoyed reading different stories about motherhood and becoming a mom and having a baby like in a dystopian world. That was interesting. Like, subscribe. Let me know what you read in January, what your favorite books were. I have the 3 there, the Nowhere Girls, Future Home of the Living God, and then The Push. Those ones were really, really good. I really enjoyed those ones. And I'm enjoying my reread of Outlander. I had a good reading month, and I don't know how much reading I'll get done in February now because I spend a lot of my time breastfeeding, but holding a book and breastfeeding is very difficult. And I do have my Kobo, my e-reader, but I'm trying to read the physical books on my bookshelf, not just ebooks. And I have a couple audiobooks coming up. I'm currently listening to A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Yeah, hopefully I can keep up with my reading a little bit. I will talk to you later. Bye!